Lesson loading. Lesson has loaded. Today's lesson is about percents. They are represented with this symbol. And the definition of a percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. If you remember, a ratio is when we have a number related to another number. So a percent is a ratio that the number below is 100. If you want to remember what a percent means, you can find the meaning in the word itself. Per cent, por ciento, for every 100. For example, if we have 40%, that means that we have 40 per cent. The ratio of a number to 100, that is exactly our definition of percent. We have to remember that in math, everything is connected. And in this case, the connection goes three ways. We're talking about a percent that can also be written as a ratio, and we know that a ratio is a fraction. And we also know that fractions can also be written as decimals. A fraction, a decimal, and a percent, we can convert them within each other. For example, let's say we have 1/2. If we write it as a decimal, it would be 0.5, and if we write it as a percent, it will be 50%. Another example can be the ratio 2/5. If we write it as a decimal, it would be 0.4, and if we write it as a percent, it will be 40%. It's interesting to think that every fraction that we have, we can write it as a decimal or as a percent. And in the same way, every percent that we have, we can convert it to a fraction or to a decimal. Now let's talk about how to find the percent of a number. And the key word here is of a number. If you remember from a previous video, when we have 4 groups of 5, here we are talking about multiplication. 4 groups of 5 is the same as 4 times 5. So 4 groups of 5 would be 20 people. Now, the same thing applies when we're talking about a percent. If we say 5% of 40, here we're talking about a multiplication. But how do we multiply 5% times 40? Let's say we have 5% of 40. So we have 2 ways of doing it. The first way is to convert the percent to a fraction. 5%. And then we simply multiply. So 5/100 times 40, we know that we multiply this and we multiply this. 200 over 100, and it's the same as 2. So 5% of 40 is 2. There is another way that we can do this, and it is to convert the percent into a decimal. So in this case, we would have that 5% equals 0.05. And then we simply multiply 0.05 times 40, and that is also equal to 2. In today's class, we're going to learn how to solve problems of this type. That is, to solve problems of the form, how to find a percent of a number. This is what we will do. So another type of problem that we can do is, for example, this one. So pause the video right now and try to solve this example in your notebook, and then we'll solve it together here in the video. First, let's try with option 1, converting the percent to a fraction. So that would mean 15 over 100 times 30. Let's divide both of these sides by 5 to simplify the fraction. So we have 3 over 20 times 30. We multiply and we get 90 over 20. And if we simplify that, it's 9 over 2. So the 15% of 30 is 9 over 2. If we write that as a mixed number, it would be 4 and 1/2, or 4.5. That's one way to solve it. The second option is to convert the percentage to a decimal. So 50% as a decimal would be 0.15 times 30. 30 times 0.15 would be 0 and 15, 0 and 3. Put the decimal, 4.5. As you can see, we get the same answer with both methods. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and now let's move on to the next activity.